Economic Justice Law Review, DreSmith, SmittyBanton. In the background, you hear Jazzy Jeff's Wednesday lunch break on the set. Figured I have a little musical background, make this a little more fun, a little more comfortable for me and you. All right, especially with the Aretha. You hear the Aretha Franklin in the background? It's one of my all-time favorite songs in life. All right, we're just going to see how this do. All right, but anyway, we're back with the Economic Justice Law Review Weekly Scholarship Digest. It's August 19th, 2020. I'm your host, DreSmith, DreSmith, SmittyBanton. You know me, 14 years, Howard University, Whiteness University, Penn State, Florida International University of Law. You know, I'm a tax law scholar, interested in economic justice, also avowedly Afrocentric, black nationalist, etc. It is my theory or my belief that structural and systemic racism can be described as racially asymmetric market failures. Not only that, every racially debilitating circumstance can be recharacterized in economic terms in four types: racially asymmetric profit maximization. Hold up, I got this stuff right here. Racially asymmetric profit maximization, racially asymmetric market competition, racially asymmetric market information, and racially asymmetric transaction costs and societal externalities. I don't care for whether it's health disparities, school to prison pipeline, affirmative action, hate crimes. All of them can be described or recharacterized in the way, in economic terms, in terms of racially asymmetric market imperfections, basically describing the way the system, the economic system, is degraded and asymmetrical and therefore will exacerbate the racial wealth gap instead of ending it. Some of you are familiar with Gary Becker, The Economics of Race and Discrimination, where he argues a free and meritocratic market will eliminate racism. It is a hands-off, so quote-unquote neoliberal approach. However, if we understand how the market works and its structure, that free and fair meritocratic market does not exist because of imperfections in the structure. And to the extent those imperfections are asymmetrical with respect to race, the market is guaranteed to exacerbate racism, not end it. In other words, instead of a free market ending racism, racism by itself disproves the existence of a free market. So what we do every week, we get 3 pieces of scholarship, or around 3 pieces of scholarship that have been recently published, and I try to recharacterize them in terms of racially asymmetric market failures and imperfections, try to explain how these circumstances will perpetuate the racial wealth gap, the most debilitating aspect of white supremacy. We put that up again: racially asymmetric market failures and imperfections. Right? Got it? All right, so let's talk about the papers that we have today. Recently published are Shayo, Buchanan, and Phillip, Atiba, Goff. Both out. Where are they both out of? I think they're both out of John Jay. I want to say, yeah, John Jay, the John Jay Department of Criminology in New York. I believe Phillip Atiba Goff he runs the Center for Public Policy, something like that. Anyway, Buchanan and Goff, Racist Stereotype Threat in Civil Rights Law. Racist Stereotype Threat. That's a proper name. I probably should have cabinet it off, called RST. Right? I guess that's the legal or the academic way of speaking on white fragility. We'll talk about it in a second. Second paper that has been published or has been recently, that I discovered recently published, Elizabeth Katz out of Washington U, St. Louis, Racial and Religious Democracy, Identity and Equality in Mid-Century Courts. That's published in the 72nd volume of the Stanford Law Review, page 1467. And then third, following up on this paper, these papers are 2 good complements, even though they're published in 2 different journals. Khaled Beydoun, Arkansas-Fayetteville, a long-time critical race theorist, very active scholar. I want to say he did a piece that he published earlier this year. His brother's putting it in, getting it in. Faith and Whiteness, Free Exercise of Religion as Racial Expression, the 105th volume of the Iowa Law Review, page 1467. And these two papers, these two last papers, Racial and Religious Democracy, Identity, and Equality in Mid-Century Courts, Faith and Whiteness, Free Exercise of Religion as Racial Expression. You want to read those back to back. One is, to put it shortly, one deals with race, religion, and interest convergence. The other deals with race, religion, interest divergence. Interesting stuff. We're going to get there. Matter of fact, let's start with the quick review with Elizabeth Katz's work. Again, it's Racial and Religious Democracy, Identity, Equality, Mid-Century Courts. Let me just read you a little piece from the paper. In our current political moment, discrimination against minority, racial, and religious groups routinely makes headlines. Though some press coverage of these occurrences acknowledges parallels, and links between racial and religious prejudices, these intersections remain under-theorized in legal and historical scholarship. Nice use of intersection, right? Shout out to Kimberly Crenshaw. Because scholars typically study race and religion separately, they have overlooked the legal significance of how race and religion coexist in both perpetrators and victims of discrimination. By contrast, this article demonstrates that the intersection of racial and religious identities has meaningfully influenced legal and political efforts to achieve equality. They're talking, the substance of the paper, or at least the factual background, is dealing with family court and other courts around the 1940s and the 50s, and their relationship to Brown versus Board of Education. In other words, let's say family courts and other courts would try to match black victims with black social workers, let's say. But also at the same time, let's say a Christian social worker with a Christian victim, or Jewish and Jewish, Muslim and Muslim. After Brown versus Board of Education, it was found to be discrimination to restrict the dealings of race to race. That to ensure that it's only white and white social worker victim, black on black social worker victim was against the Equal Protection Clause, and therefore white should be able to serve black, black should be able to serve white. All that. Detaching the tethering of religion was a lot stickier, right? So this idea of group subordination, how do we come up with constructs that compare, contrast, that deal with group subordination, even though they take on different forms? And that, again, I will bring up my theory again of racially asymmetric market failures. It's one thing for market structures or anything to be disproportional, to be unequal. It's a little bit different to say that they are asymmetrical, right? Asymmetrical doesn't by itself describe subordination, I have to say. I know I'm criticizing my own theory. But let's say black folks are usually asymmetrically disfavored, whereas white folks are often asymmetrically favored, right? And so we can use this in religion. We can use the same construct to talk about group subordination in terms of religion, and we can describe a religion as being subordinated to the extent they are asymmetrically disfavored in the marketplace, whether it be for competition, information, transaction costs, externalities, etc., right? And I also think if we go back to, and I know this is a little different, but we talk about affirmative action in Harvard and Yale admissions and dealing with black students, Asian students, and white students. How do you have affirmative action for black students, but then also not have use different scores and buffers for black students, but then but then have rote scores for Asian students? Right? How do you protect Asian students against discrimination where they're underrepresented, even though they have high scores, at the same time protect black students who are underrepresented because they have low scores? And the way we do this is by recognizing the asymmetries in the marketplace, right? That Asian people, regardless of their scores, have to deal with more asymmetries than white folks as a group, right? Again, this requires us to deal specifically with group rights and interests, which the Supreme Court chooses not to do, but that is a choice. There's nothing in the Constitution that prohibits the judiciary from recognizing group subordination. And to the extent, it's the tradition from England, I thought we had a revolution against England. I see we're still fighting it. All right, so that's a great piece. Just finishing off, it says this article also calls for additional studies that free racial civil rights and First Amendment religious scholarship from their current silos in order to better understand the concurrent development of these crucial contested areas of law. Again, I offer racially asymmetric market failures as a mechanism that can do that work. All right, and I'm going to show y'all. Here we go on the other side. Let's talk about its complementary paper. Khaled Beydoun, I think that's how you pronounce his name. Please correct me if I'm wrong on that. His new paper that just came out, Iowa Law Review, Faith in Whiteness, Free Exercise of Religion as Racial Expression. Let me read a little bit from the paper. This article examines the intimate interplay between race and religion during a moment of emergent white populism and religious intolerance. By building off foundational social psychology and legal literatures examining identity performance, this article also contributes a new framework theorizing how religious identity is negotiated and performed against racism, religious animus, and threats that blur them together. It then applies this framework to 6 contemporary case studies illustrating the free exercise trade-offs and racial stakes of faith in whiteness in action. Very, very powerful. Again, if we're talking about the first one where Black judges and Jewish judges in the 1950s worked together to fight racism because their interests converged, Beydoun is talking about the ways in which Christianity and Black folks, or even the Muslim identity, diverge. That Christianity and other forms of religion are raced, right, towards the idea of white supremacy, where white folks, and I think this applies beyond Christianity, that there becomes it becomes the, what's the word I'm looking for? The milestone, or the marker of superiority, right? Of supremacy. Still looking for that word. Somebody help me out in the comment section. So Khaled Beydoun is talking about the subordination of Black folks, Muslim folks, non-white folks through their religions, instead of the opposite when we're talking about Elizabeth Katz's paper, Black folks and others of religious minorities working together. Both of them fit within a framework of white supremacy. I'm very interested in Khaled's, Professor Beydoun's framework that he says that theorizes how religious identity is negotiated and performed against racism, religious animus, and threats that blur them together. Very interesting stuff. All right, so 2 very good papers: Racial and Religious Democracy, Identity and Equality Mid-Century Courts, Khaled Beydoun, Free Exercise of Religion as Racial Expression. All right, now our third paper for today is Kim Bayo Buchanan and Phillip Atiba Goff. I think I remember that they, the John Jay Institute, or John Jay College in New York. Their paper is Racist Stereotype Threat in Civil Rights Law, 67th volume of the UCLA Law Review, page 316, 2020. They are expressing and describing a concept they call racist stereotype threat. Racist stereotype threat. You can, in popular terms, it's more like white fragility. It is the reflexiveness of white folks who are fear being called racist. This fear of being called racist is weaponized against those fighting for racial justice, right? It again goes back to the Brown versus Board of Education as setting a norm against racism, that it was morally bad from there forth, or at least societally bad, communally bad, normatively bad going forward to be racist. And so we see now that any attempt to fix racial justice can only work if nobody is accused of actually being racist. That we have to fight neoliberalism, that we have to fight capitalism, we have to fight isms and other things that do not demean a specific white individual or discrete group of white individuals, because that attack on them, right, is interest divergence. Right? The interests can't converge if you're attacking me personally. You can attack these concepts because capitalism or neoliberalism is detached from whiteness and also detached from any one single individual. It pretends that the market is structured all by itself. Right? But if we go after neoconservatives, if we go after the people that create these market structures knowing that they will have disproportionate effects, then those accusations are turned around, are spun around, and used to describe black folks as caustic or unappreciative, and certainly to thwart change because it is demeaning and it somehow hurts the psyche of white people. Right? Let me get off my soapbox and let me get something from the paper. I took an extended blurb from this because I think it's so good. Right? This article explores traces of RST doctrine on civil rights doctrine. This article explores traces of racist stereotype threat on civil rights doctrine. In civil rights cases, judicial opinions often selectively empathize with the feelings of white litigants, suggesting that the suspicion of racism is itself racist and shortchanging protected equality interests to protect white litigants against it. In equal protection, employment discrimination, and voting rights cases, judge-made doctrines, right? Love how you put that. Judge-made doctrines empower white litigants to invoke their desire not to be judged racist as both sword and shield. Litigants' presumed or asserted experience of racist stereotype threat has been accepted as basis to challenge government action in both affirmative action and voting rights doctrines. The invocation of racist stereotype threat, or RST, also works as a defense to equal protection and employment discrimination claims, where intent requirements shelter defendants from accountability for the racially disparate effects of their actions unless they are proven racist. You know, I talk about the Byron Allen case very specifically with regard to that they interpreted 1981 to say that you have to be Eddie Murphy. Remember Eddie Murphy as Billy Ray Valentine in Trading Places, and he's smoking a joint in the bathroom, and that's the only way he catches the Dukes, saying that they don't want ever have a nigger run their company because otherwise they smiling in his face and look as fair as possible. Right? That's the level of proof that you're going to have. And remember, Eddie Murphy or Billy Ray Valentine did not have a tape recorder, so they're going to deny saying it. That's how high the evidentiary standards are. And yes, they're going to talk about how much they've given to black folks and that fragility. Oh my God, how could you demean my character in accusing me or even thinking that I could possibly be racist? Absolutely is an actionable claim because juridical individuals share that interest. All right. The invocation of RST also works as a defense. Right, we already talked about it. No similar accommodation is extended to stereotype threats experienced by non-white civil rights plaintiffs whose sense of group-based injustice or outraged dignity is insufficient to ground an equal protection claim is deemed largely irrelevant to the court's objective standard of workplace discrimination. In both equal protection and employment law, liability depends on white mindsets. The civil rights guaranteed by Reconstruction amendments and the Civil Rights Act should not be limited to accommodate racist stereotype threat. Excellent paper, and I expect nothing less from Professor Bedouin. Right, he gets it in. And from a racially asymmetric market imperfections standpoint, when we're talking about employment discrimination and equal protection claims, we're most often talking about racially asymmetric market competition. Right. that whether it be in contracting, employment, contacts, or what have you, the idea that white folks are able to discriminate freely, because to accuse them of such brings is a sin on the victim's behalf, makes the marketplace or the competition in the marketplace asymmetrically favorable to white folks, asymmetrically disfavorable to black folks. Also, to the extent this applies to transactions writ large, it is a means of lessening the cost. This proportionality lessens the cost of transactions to white folks, right? Black folks are expected to bear the stereotype. We're expected to accept it. We take on those costs, where RST and the doctrines that address it reduce the cost for white folks. Again, when we talk about these microaggressions, racist microaggressions, we're talking about small little taxes. Shout out to Sean Rochester, Black Taxes. Small little taxes, small little externalities that are asymmetrically distributed. This is a great paper to talk about asymmetry, right? That is not just different or disproportional, right? I'm sorry, it's not just disproportional. It's not just lesser or greater. It's asymmetrical, right? It's treated differently in different manners, and especially in ways that disfavor. So, great paper by Khaled. I'm sorry, this is not Professor Bedouin. I totally misspoke. This is Goff and Buchanan. Goff and Buchanan. Let me say that a couple times just so I can make it right. Kim Shayo Buchanan and Phillip Atiba Goff in Racist Stereotype Threat in Civil Rights Law. Maybe that's why I was messing up the name, because I knew I was doing something wrong, right? Kim Shayo Buchanan, Phillip Atiba Goff, Racist Stereotype Threat in Civil Rights Law, UCLA Law Review, page 316. Elizabeth Katz put something out, Racial and Religious Democracy, Identity and Equality in Mid-Century Courts, Stanford Law Review. And a very nice compliment to that paper talking about race and religion is Khaled Bedouin. Now, this is his real paper. Professor Bedouin, Faith and Whiteness, Free Exercise of Religion as Racial Expression. Once again, thank you for joining us at the Economic Justice Law Review Weekly Digest. We are going to see you next week. And perhaps we're going to keep doing it along with Jazzy Jeff's magnificent lunch hour every Wednesday at 12 o'clock. That'd be nice, wouldn't it? Maybe for me. All right, so I'll see you guys next week. EJLR, DreSmith signing off.